The Other Side, a young boy's near-death experience that changed everything. Have you ever wondered what happens after death? Is there really something beyond this life, or is it just the end of the road? For centuries, humans have speculated, feared, and hoped for an afterlife, a place where the soul continues its journey. But what if some of us have already caught a glimpse of the other side? What if a few have crossed over, only to return, forever changed by what they saw? Today, I want to share with you one such story, a tale that will challenge what you know about life, death, and the mysteries that lie beyond. This is a story that first came to light decades ago in 1965, but its impact has rippled through the years. It's a story about a young boy, an unexpected accident, and an extraordinary experience that will forever alter his perception of reality. It's a story that defies logic and reason, and perhaps it will make you reconsider everything you thought you knew about life after death. Let's go back in time to a warm day in the San Gabriel Valley, California, where a young boy named Richard was riding his bike with his best friend, Felix. It was a sunny afternoon in the suburban town of El Monte, and the air was filled with the hum of everyday life. The road was busy, as it often was, and Richard and Felix were enjoying the simple freedom that only childhood can offer. But fate, as it often does, had a different plan for them that day. Richard was riding on the right side of the street, heading in the same direction as his friend Felix, who was on the opposite side. They had been riding together for a while, but now, Richard needed to cross the street to catch up with Felix. It was a simple task. Just a quick glance over his shoulder, wait for the coast to be clear, and make the crossing. But the road was curved, and with the limited visibility, he couldn't see more than 100 feet ahead. He knew the cars on this street drove fast, too fast for comfort, and he wasn't sure if it was safe to cross. Richard called out to Felix, asking if he saw any cars coming. Felix shook his head, signaling that the road was clear. Trusting his friend's judgment, Richard veered to the left, preparing to cross the street. But in that brief moment, his life would change forever. The last thing Richard remembers was the terrifying sound of screeching tires. He turned his head and saw a massive 1962 Chevy Impala hurtling toward him, less than 10 feet away. The car's blue-gray tires were locked, sending plumes of smoke into the air as it tried to stop. But it was too late. The impact was imminent. And then, silence. Richard's next memory wasn't of pain or fear, but of floating, suspended in the air about 20 feet above the ground. He looked down and saw a boy lying motionless in the middle of the road. The boy was sprawled in an unnatural position, his left leg bent at an odd angle, his clothes torn and bloodied. He wasn't breathing. The surreal calm that washed over Richard was both strange and peaceful. It was as if the chaos below didn't matter. He could hear the voices of people rushing toward the boy, shouting orders, trying to resuscitate him. But there was something unusual about what he heard. He could hear the words, but they weren't just coming from the people's mouths. He heard them in his mind as well. One voice said, "Call an ambulance, he's not breathing." But the same voice echoed inside his mind with a different message. "Oh my God, don't die on me." It was as if thoughts were becoming words and words were becoming thoughts. And then, it wasn't just the voices of the people below him that he could hear. He could hear everyone's thoughts, each one clear and distinct, all at the same time. He could understand everything they were thinking. The moment felt like it was stretching on forever. Time seemed to bend and expand, losing its usual boundaries. The scene below him seemed distant and detached, like something he was watching from afar rather than something he was part of. And then something caught his attention, something that would change everything. Above him, he noticed a bright light. At first, it appeared as a tiny pinhole in the sky, but as he watched, the hole began to grow, and light poured through it, distorting everything around it. The light was so bright, yet strangely beautiful, like mother of pearl, shimmering with streaks of blue, pink, green, and gold. It was unlike any light Richard had ever seen. It wasn't harsh or painful like sunlight. It was soothing and mesmerizing. But as the light grew brighter, so did the sound. It began as a low buzz, but it quickly intensified into a deafening roar. The hole in the sky widened, and Richard felt himself being pulled toward it. It wasn't just a gentle pull. It felt as though he was being squeezed through a narrow passage, something that was far too small for him. The sensation was like racing through a tunnel at the speed of light, an experience straight out of a science fiction movie. Yet Richard wasn't alone. Even though he couldn't see anyone, he felt the presence of others around him. He passed through what felt like an invisible barrier, something separating him from the world he had just left. And then, as he continued through the light, he began to notice shapes, misty, swirling forms that gradually became more distinct. Slowly, the figures took shape, and Richard could see that they were tall and slender, draped in flowing robes. One of them had a beard, and they all had long, shoulder-length hair. They were not ordinary people. These were beings of some otherworldly nature, beings that Richard instinctively knew were ancient, their wisdom and presence spanning countless ages. There was a sense of benevolence about them, a deep understanding and care, like that of parents watching over their children. There was no judgment, no condemnation, even for the worst actions he had taken in his past lives. One of the figures spoke to him, explaining that Richard wasn't supposed to be there yet, that he still had work to do and lessons to learn. Richard didn't want to go back. He felt at home in this strange, peaceful realm. It felt like where he truly belonged. But the beings were firm. They told him that he had agreed to return and fulfill his purpose. It wasn't his time yet. With reluctance, Richard understood. But before he left, they told him he could ask questions. Any questions. They promised to answer, but it was important that he remembered everything when he returned. Richard asked them if this was heaven. They responded that it could be, but it could also be hell if that was what he believed. This reality, they explained, was an extension of oneself. We are all co-creators of our reality, shaping it with our beliefs and perceptions. When he asked about God, they explained that God isn't a distant being to be worshipped, but rather, God is within all of us. We are all expressions of the divine. There is no separation between God and us. We are one and the same. As Richard asked more questions, the answers seemed to reveal profound truths, truths about existence, the interconnectedness of all things, and the purpose of life. But perhaps the most striking answer came when he asked if he could stay. They told him that he wouldn't want to. He loved his lessons, especially the hard ones. It was his choice to return, but the lessons of life were what kept him coming back. Time seemed to stretch on as Richard learned more about the mysteries of the universe, but eventually he was told it was time to go. Reluctantly, he agreed. Suddenly, Richard found himself back in his body. The pain hit him like a wave, and he realized he was in an ambulance, a tube in his throat. Blood filled his mouth and he could taste it. As he looked at the attendant beside him, a strange sensation of déjà vu washed over him. He had dreamed this moment just days before. In the dream, he had seen himself lying there, in the exact same situation. What followed was a series of revelations about Richard's near-death experience, answers to questions about consciousness, time, and the senses. Richard found that his senses were heightened during the experience. He could see all around him, 360 degrees at once. He could hear thoughts, not just voices, and he could feel an overwhelming sense of unity with the universe. Everything seemed connected. Past, present, and future were all part of the same fabric of existence. Afterward, Richard's religious beliefs shifted. He no longer attended church. He no longer believed in the need to worship God in the traditional sense. God, he realized, wasn't interested in worship. He was interested in growth, in experience, and in the interconnectedness of all life. This is just one of many stories of near-death experiences and glimpses of the other side. These experiences raise more questions than answers, but they also provide insight into the nature of existence, the soul, and the mystery that lies beyond. If you've had a similar experience or glimpse of the afterlife, I'd love to hear your story. Share it in the comments, and don't forget to leave a like if you enjoyed the video. That said, thank you and see you next time.